My name is Zachary Green. I'm the lead faculty for RISE San Diego. We welcome you again to the next in our RISE Now series, Black Mental Health Matters. RISE San Diego is a program that has as its pillars the ideas of civic engagement. We work with community-based organizations and create partnerships that really address the complex challenges of our urban neighborhoods. We seek to elevate and advance urban leadership through dialogue-based engagement, dynamic nonprofit partnerships, and direct training and support to increase the capacity of urban residents to affect meaningful community change. So again, leadership development, nonprofit partnership, and civic engagement. This evening, what we're going to be focusing on is mental health, specifically in the Black community, but more largely the whole issue of how we deal with mental health in our communities. We have a number of people with us. We have Dr. Anna Arteaga-Biggs. We have Dr. Wooten from the county, Dr. Kristopher Hall from University of San Diego, Carlos McCray, a social worker and activist, and he's going to talk to us about hip hop treatment, and Wilnisha Sutton, otherwise known as Truth. And my name is, again, Zachary Green. I'm a clinical psychologist by training, so this is my area of focus and a lot of fun for me. What we're going to be talking about, because this is a very serious matter, because we have three issues that are going on concurrently. One is the issue of the social unrest related to racism in this country. And that has been a major focus of the work that we've been doing in RISE Now up until today. In addition to that, when we began that exploration, we also discovered that there were significant mental health challenges because we're also facing a pandemic. And even though things are opening up, the disproportionate impact on African-American communities and Latino communities in this region are still being documented. In addition to that, because of the impact of this quarantine, of us being locked in and locked down, there are also tremendous economic impacts, which also disproportionately impact the communities and neighborhoods that we work with in RISE San Diego. So the way that we like to do this is that you will have an opportunity in just a few moments to be able to participate. We want to know your views. We're going to give you a poll on that board, not right now. What we want you to know is that there's certain housekeeping first. First of which is that what we have here is that you will have the chat function, which is open right now. Soon as we begin, if there's things that come to mind that you're thinking about, there are people behind the scenes that will be monitoring the chat and will be paying attention to themes that emerge from there so that we are able to use those in our process. In addition to the chat, you also have the opportunity for questions and answers. Based on how this discourse goes, and I already know it's going to be lively with this crew, then what we're going to be doing is that we will attend to a few of those questions at the end. But please do not hesitate to do that. So again, we have Dr. Kristopher Hall, Associate Professor in Counseling at the University of San Diego. Carlos, we're going with that Smiles McCray, who's a social work entrepreneur who has a really very important view of how we can go about this work that he's doing. Dr. Anna Laura Arteaga-Biggs, who's going to bring that clinical perspective and a lot of the perspectives also on what we're talking about in terms of trauma. And then Wilnisha, Truth Sutton, who is an Artivist. And we'll talk about all that. Now let's get started. Let's do this poll question. And that gives us an idea of where we're going to start. In terms of your perceptions of the mental health needs of the Black community, which of the following do you believe are most important to address? So you will get to choose between one of these five. Number one, racism and racial trauma continue to affect the mental well-being of the Black community, who already face so many obstacles when it comes to receiving mental health treatment. Number two, Black activists and community members are experiencing burnout and are in constant state of survival mode without proper care. Three, therapists need to be provided with racial trauma training to ensure healthcare providers look at mental health holistically. Four, the stark difference in how the Black community and the white community address mental health. The Black community is told to pray about it and to keep things in the house and to deal with it. And then five, the negative stigma on mental health therapy is really expensive, and finding one and how do you do that is a daunting task and almost doesn't seem or feel like it's worth it sometimes. So what we're going to do is pull up the poll question. You choose one of those, and then we'll see where we're going to start that. You have about a minute to answer those questions. Okay, thank you, Truth.
Couldn't help it.
I know you could help it. Okay, let's see our results. Okay, so where we want to start is around the issues of racism and racial trauma. So that doesn't mean that the other issues aren't important. So that means panelists, that's where the people who are here, that's where they have the energy, and that's where we're going to start. So let's begin, and can we go to full screen? Thank you. So I would ask each of you to give just that sort of overview from your perspective, and try to give some sense of the perspective you're coming from, because all of you represent different mental health elements. And so if you could each sort of speak to that, and then sort of speak to what we mean in terms of trauma. Okay, so we're going to start with Dr. Anna. Dr. Anna, okay, give us that 1 minute overview.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you so much for having me. I think the first thing I really want to start off saying is just, I recognize that, you know, we're speaking about Black lives, and here is this non-Black woman of color sitting on this panel, right, speaking about mental health. I would imagine there are a lot of people who have some feelings about that and some thoughts about that, and that is completely understandable. So I'm coming from today, my perspective as someone who is deeply passionate about working with the Black community. I have years of experience. Over half of my practice is comprised of Black patients. So I'm speaking from my experience as a Latina immigrant, but also speaking towards the clinical work that I do with Black patients.
Thank you very much. And yeah, can you add just a little bit in terms of the issues? What are the kinds of issues that you're already seeing with your patients?
Exhaustion, terror, frustration, rage, isolation, just a complete feeling of being overwhelmed and not knowing how to navigate mental health treatment. People who are brand new to this and trying to figure out, you know, how to start sessions with me and what that means, and then recognizing that that means they have to sit more in their rage and trauma and exhaustion. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Kristopher Hall, you're an associate professor, tenured professor at University of San Diego in the counseling department. Could you speak to this?
Really, I'm going to speak to it kind of from the academic sense. And the ivory tower is always trying to collect information and understand more about kind of the human experience. And in counseling research, at least with my counseling research, what I'm always trying to do is understand more of the story and what are people bringing into the world, and then put that story in academia. So one of the big pieces that I've been looking at and trying to understand is this generational trauma piece, and how we are collectively holding the trauma of our ancestors, and we're consistently bringing it forward generation to generation. And within the Black community specifically, that includes our enslavement and that our continued abuse at the hands of our oppressors. And whenever anyone walks into a counseling room, this is already something that is kind of sitting on them that we need to work our way through and work out if we're working with these clients. A different part of it that I study is looking at what's called racial battle fatigue. And within racial battle fatigue, it basically states that we are mentally, emotionally, and physically tired, and continually tired because we're fighting off macroaggressions and microaggressions at any time. So your body exists in a kind of fight or flight stage, and with Black people and people who have been systemically disenfranchised, you're always in fight stage. So it makes you mentally tired. It breaks your body down, where we are more susceptible to diseases and other things of that nature, where we have less resources to fight those mental battles. So we're kind of just living day to day to a certain extent, but we still manage to find resilience and fortify ourselves regardless. So again, I'm sitting in the storytelling phase and kind of understanding what we're bringing forward from the past.
Thank you. And there are a number of issues that you raised, the intergenerational trauma, but you also brought in a very important piece that I also want us to think about. And that's the piece where we have to look into what really happens with us. Tony, you're on camera, which also happens with us, which is that there are also physiological consequences to the mental health issues. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes, they are all connected. The mind and the body cannot be pulled apart, and what the mind can't handle, the body will, and what the body can't handle, the mind will. So they're constantly working in tandem to kind of keep us up, essentially. And we are always doing that work.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And then I'm going to go to you, Carlos McCray, because this is a lot of the work that you do on a day-to-day basis in your social work practice.
Yeah, so for me, my experience, especially in City Heights and in Southeast San Diego, going in and out of hundreds of homes since 2006, I definitely get a lot of experience with literally the physical environments. As we talk about Black community, what does that look like? What does the Black community look like? And how is it different than, let's say, North Park or La Jolla? And so those microaggressions and that Kristopher Hall was speaking about, like the cost of poverty in everyday transactions, right? Being a social worker trying to help African Americans get their children back, and we're referring them to resources, but there are no therapy resources in their communities, right? So we're sending them on a bus to Old Town or whatever, and it takes so much of their time to get to resources that people with cars or people with resources in their neighborhoods can get to a lot faster, which allows you to be more productive in the day. And so when you're limited in your access, that causes even more stress and trauma, because it's harder to feel productive and to get things done. And your environment just isn't as fun. It's not as relaxing, fewer parks, fewer trees, and maybe aesthetically it's not as soothing as maybe some other communities for various reasons. And so it all adds up: mind, body, soul, and community.
Okay, could you give a quick picture of like a home that you go into and some of the things that you encounter?
Ooh, man, one of the things that I think people don't realize is home environments often resemble people's mental states and how they're feeling internally. And so I've gone into a lot of homes. What I think is interesting, especially with poverty, I've gone into homes where people don't have food in the fridge or the cupboards, but they keep a really clean house. And I've also gone into homes where people make money, but then the house is filthy and there's cigarette burns on the couches, right? And both scenarios, people are struggling, trying to make ends meet, trying to figure out how they're going to raise their children to be successful and be a better version of themselves and raise the bar generationally. And so a lot of times the homes, it's a prioritization challenge where they're struggling, trying to figure out what to prioritize above others. And it just is, it's so heartbreaking sometimes to see families in their homes struggling with, where literally everything they have is in like a very small space.
Thank you for bringing some of the heart to that, because I think, we can sort of do this as an intellectual thing, but you're talking about the real deal experience and truth. I know that that's something you do this as casework as well. And you've done this both in the San Diego area as well as in the Virginia and Maryland area and DC. So can you give us that picture of what it is that you see?
Yeah, a lot of times what we don't understand is that, a lot of Black people don't understand is that trauma affects everything and how we show up all the time in all spaces. And so a lot of times we're not able to really fully show up as our authentic self because of everything we've been through. Like Dr. Kristopher said, everything our ancestors have been through is in our genes. Like we can't really get away from it a lot of times. And so that really affects us. And I see a lot of people self-medicating whether that be with alcohol, drugs, overindulging, too much sex, or, you know what I'm saying, too much TV, too much games, and then not having healthy coping skills and trying to justify the smoking, you know, like I gotta smoke because I can't cope with what's going on. Like I gotta smoke before sorry.
Not good healthy coping skills. What are you talking about? What do you mean
Like,
not good healthy coping skills?
So of course, you know, Black people, we're not used to going to therapy. So we wouldn't think to like meditate, just sit there for a second in silence. Like
Right.
Sometimes that can just help you gather your thoughts. Not having good coping skills could be like not knowing who to call when you're in trouble. Like, of course, sometimes calling your pastor, he may not have the answers. Maybe you need to call somebody that has that degree, or get in touch with somebody that's a therapist that can help you tackle those things, or a life coach, or someone that is tapped in that realm. Another healthy coping skill, just journaling. Like sometimes that can help you gather your thoughts. Going for a walk, just coping skills like that. A lot of times we use alcohol, like I said, or marijuana. I mean, to each their own, but excessiveness in anything is not good. I also see like a lot of times Black women feeling like they got to be super women, like they have to do everything. And everybody, because everybody depends on them a lot of time in the Black community. The Black woman is like the staple a lot of times, and she doesn't get the praise that she deserves often, but she's always helping everyone and saving everyone except for herself. So a lot of times Black women are drowning in trauma and misery and pain, and still carrying the burden and the weight of the family. And then Black men not having a lot of healthy role models to know what it looks like to navigate, you know. And generationally we are getting better, but like now the generation are, you know, a lot of our young brothers, they out here going to school, they're really doing that father thing, and they didn't have that type of role model. So sometimes they don't know what that looks like, they're winging it, and so not getting praised for when they are doing well, but always getting talked about when they're not doing it well. So that's definitely a lot of things that I see, and the pressure of being better than the generation before, but not working with the generation before. Like, I'm not gonna be like my mama. I don't want to talk to her about what she did, so I can heal this thing. I'm just gonna make sure I'm better than her, but perpetuating the same cycles, and and not being better at all, and not at all, but not being better fully.
I know where you, but because what you're talking to is what Dr. Hall was talking about a moment ago. Now, everybody's using this word trauma, but we haven't even talked about what we're talking about. So let's see, Dr. Hall, be all academic on us and tell us what we're talking about when we're talking about trauma.
So essentially, when we're talking about trauma, we have to think about how that shows up. So for some people, it could be not being able to sleep. It could be blanks in memory, and then things suddenly coming back, depending on what their triggers could have been.
Right.
For other people, it can be those negative coping mechanisms that Truth was talking about. So those negative coping mechanisms that you're overindulging in order to not think about certain things. So it's us avoiding re-experiencing certain events that we know were damaging for us, and how we navigate life through that. And
Yeah,
what often happens.
wait a minute, Dr. Hall, but everybody has something like that. We all run into situations where there are things that are difficult. We have sleepless nights. We want to take an extra bottle, or we want to, you know, hit that pipe. So all these things kind of happen. So I don't understand what trauma is. Okay, so what is so traumatic about being Black?
So trauma is happening when this stuff is happening to you repeatedly, when it is all the time, when at the end of the day, you can't really escape it. So when you do sleep, you're waking up and then you try and fall asleep again. It's that repetition that happens when we're dealing with trauma. So of course we all have adverse experiences. That's just what life is. But it is the continual re-experiencing of these negative experiences that we have to worry about.
Okay, so Dr. Anna, so this is the same thing that you were talking about. Is this the kind of thing that you're seeing in your clinical practice?
I am seeing that. I mean, I think too, just to kind of add, you know, self-harm, suicidal thoughts, just, you know, when we think of trauma, I always think of it, especially with the Black community, in terms of like complex PTSD or complex trauma, where you're talking about, you know, years and years and years and years of trauma on trauma on trauma.
No, you're gonna have to break that down. What do you mean? Complex PTSD, what does that mean?
So complex trauma is usually, you can have like PTSD where you have maybe one event that's really traumatizing and, you know, it leads to these symptoms, right, of post-traumatic stress disorder. When we think of complex trauma or complex PTSD, we're talking about people who have had trauma, you know, extensively through the years, kind of over and over and over in multiple areas of their lives. So when you're thinking about, you know, racism and the amount of microaggressions that Black people are experiencing in every single facet of life, sometimes even at home, right? That plus whatever other trauma they might have experienced, sexual abuse, a car accident, you know, a rape, something awful like that could have happened to them. And you're talking about then seeing police brutality. Sorry.
About microaggression like it's a real thing.
It is a real thing.
But a lot of people don't believe it's a real thing. So you have to break that down, please.
So the word microaggressions, I think, is a little misleading because it makes it sound like it's something small, like it's something, and it isn't. These are daily things often, right? Daily, multiple times a day, that can be something that I think what's really tough about microaggressions is there's like a really strong gaslighting component to it where it's like, oh, I didn't mean that. Oh, you're just taking that personally. Oh, that's not really a big deal. So it can be, you know, just a comment like, oh, you're beautiful for a brown person. Or, oh, you speak very eloquently for a Black person. Or we don't really think of you as Black, you know, those kinds of comments. And that's just 3 examples out of, I mean, billions of examples of microaggressions. And I'm sure the other panelists can speak to that, you know, more thoroughly.
Okay, and so the critique is that then Black people take just, you know, they're just victims and want to take all that stuff too seriously. I mean, come on, please. Why can't you just, you know, I'm just kidding.
Well, what's
Carlos is about to jump out the screen, but you finish, Dr. Anna, and then I'll let Carlos jump out the screen. Go ahead.
One thing that's been incredibly apparent to me in my years of training in hospitals and poverty medicine and otherwise, I worked on consult liaison at Harbor UCLA Medical Center. And what became abundantly clear to me is that Black people, particularly Black women's pain, is minimized or it's erased completely. It's like a non-thing. And they're not prescribed pain medications the same way. They are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth. Psychologically, their pain is not taken seriously. It's minimized. And this is men as well, of course, Black men as well. But I think that this is also seen in microaggressions. And I know Carlos is chomping at the bit, so I'll like, oh, no.
Yeah, Carlos, yeah, I clearly triggered you, so let's go with it. Come on, Carlos, what you got to say now?
You know, when you're in communities and you see, and you're in the homes of people as that are struggling, right? Trying to make ends meet or trying to figure out how to discipline their kid. When you're in homes of people who are hyper paranoid about the police being called, they feel like they can't call for help because they might end up getting hurt. When they feel like they can't reach out and talk to their children's teachers about challenges at home because they're afraid that the teacher is going to call child welfare services on them. When they feel like they don't have a role model or a mentor to call for whatever reason, right? We mentor young Black men who want to start businesses, and they're like, you're the only business owner that we know that's African American, right? And so who are they supposed to call? And when you're working with people who really feel at a loss that society has failed them over and over because it has, because, you know, one incident at school leads to suspension for African Americans, whereas, you know, for white children, it's not necessarily the same. And they just see the world in this through a lens, the only lens that they could view it as like danger is outside. Okay. And it causes so much pain inside that then they don't know how to function, right? And then so maybe they resonate with hip hop music or graffiti, but then those are looked down upon in our culture and community, and those are other microaggressions. Like, what are you listening to? You know, and so it just like, how can you be yourself? You know, Truth was talking about being your authentic self. Well, a lot of Black people that I've met and worked with and sat in their home, they're like, I don't even know who I am. I'm just trying to survive all the damn time.
Okay, so that's where I want to go with Truth, because Truth, you're saying that this shows up in all kinds of ways in terms of all kinds of dysfunctions that are a function of this racism. It isn't just that people choose to be trafficked or that they choose to be abusive or they choose to have addiction. These kinds of things are a function of the context in which Black lives happen. Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like, it's like options of no options. Like, what can I do? Like, I gotta get in this lifestyle of what we would call prostitution because I ain't got no money. Like, you know, I saw my mama do it. My uncle was a pimp. That's all he taught me. So, like, what else am I supposed to do? Like, I can't even go into like what corporate America and try to navigate that realm. Like, that's something that could be scary to folks who haven't had the proper training and things like that to go into corporate America.
But people say that you should have the resilience and strength within yourself to rise above those circumstances.
Pull yourself up by your bootstrings.
Yes, right. So tell me, so the critique on Black folks, you know, is that, you know, if you would just sort of like stand up and do your work and show that power and all those kinds of things, then you would be able to manage this. But you're saying that there's something else that's going on here. Really give a sense of that, please, Truth.
For me, it goes to like, so we all believe in post-traumatic stress disorder. And then there's Dr. Zachary who talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome and how that affects Black people, white people, Latinos. It affects all of us holistically in how we show up in spaces and how we're raised. So like if white people are used to seeing Black people getting lynched from years ago, they're okay with seeing them just getting beheaded and dead in front of them. Of course, they're going to be desensitized to the feelings and how Black people feel and think as people, period. They just see them as animals. And Black people, we're just used to being treated certain ways and how we treat our family members and how we raise our children. We're always yelling at them, hitting them, beating them, perpetuating like the slave master type of situation. So when we show up to spaces, how can we be our authentic self when we haven't even got the love and the care and just the simple basic needs as a human in the home? Like Carlos is saying, I go in homes all the time and just go talk to my clients and I'm just seeing mamas yell at their kids all the time, like, get your ass over here. And it's like, hold on, like, I'm not gonna go in there and tell them how to be a parent, but I just see it and it's heartbreaking. And they wonder why their children don't come to them. Like, she doesn't listen to me. Well, you're not respecting her as a human. So how is she going to respect you? Like, so I just see that oftentimes, and it's just very disheartening because it's like, how can we pull ourselves up when our parents don't even know how to pull them? They haven't been able to do that. I think like, it's tough because a lot of times I'm seeing now that this new generation is teaching the old generation a lot of things. About like therapy, about coping skills and trauma. What do you mean trauma? This is what we deal with. My mama would be like, just go to work, just do what you told. And I'm like, no, I'm not just going to work and I'm not just doing what I told. If this white ED is out of pocket, then we're gonna hold her accountable. I'm gonna rally up all the Black people. We're gonna come together and we're gonna make sure that she knows that what she's doing is not right. I'm not gonna just work. I might wanna have my own business. Like Carlos, you know what I'm saying? I might wanna be something totally different. But the older generations, a lot of times they don't know how to support us in that way because they're so used to just doing things as they're told.
Yeah, I want to work with this generational piece because Carlos, you were talking about hip hop and graffiti, and then Dr. Hall, I want to get the intergenerational piece because Truth is trying to say how that's showing up. But I want Carlos, can you speak more to this hip hop piece and that there may be something actually therapeutic in how the culture is expressing itself right now?
Yeah, and let me first preface, I'm not an expert on hip hop therapy, but my colleague and business partner, she really has taught me a lot about hip hop therapy, Ms. Brittany Williams. And the idea that, for example, you could read one of Tupac's poems or just Dear Mama, right? If you were to read that as spoken word, you would hear a lot of emotion, sorrow, you know, some guilt in there, the love and affection, but you wouldn't associate that with a Black person. Right? Like if a white person were to go up and read that poem, they'd get a bunch of snaps and claps but then when you put it to some certain beats, now all of a sudden it's different, you know, it's hard music, right? And so our music isn't validated. Our feelings, it's hard for our feelings to be validated through music because of the negative connotation that comes with rap music, right? Now, I'm not talking about all rap music because some rap music is, you know, I mean,
but you're saying that there's underneath all of that, if you really just listen to the words, you can have the feeling in it. And that's what is happening with a lot of the young people, is that they're able to feel that, and that's expressing something for them. Am I hearing you correctly?
Absolutely. But then you have the adults talking about your music's trash. So what do you do as a kid, right? Your form of expression is getting shot down.
Okay, so what you're saying is that this is a form of expression, but then there's this other message, and maybe this is this microaggression piece, is that here it is, something that expresses, that speaks to my soul and my way of being, but then someone else is saying it's trash, and okay, and it's making it about thugs and criminals and all that carrying on. Am I understanding you? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Truth, you want to speak to that, and then Dr. Hall, you got to link this all together from that academic perspective for us. Okay, and then Anna, I want to know how we're going to work this out, you know, what you're seeing in the clinical practice. Okay, Truth, go ahead, please.
Just to speak on the music aspect, like, you know, the music industry is ran by white people. So they definitely have an agenda and a purpose on why the music is made a certain way, right? If we telling people, Black people, to you know, F women, I want to just say it like it is. We want to tell them F women and, you know, like I'm a pimp and, you know, all these negative things, then music is powerful. So that's feeding our people, and they're thinking that things, and that's why they show up a certain way. Because in the 80s, in the late 70s, they was talking about Black power, and they was talking about fight the system, and that's when the Black people was coming together. It's powerful, especially in the Black community. I'm getting chills because music is who we are. That's how we always have expressed ourselves. So if we having people that are not our people running the music industry and telling us, hey, if you want to be a superstar, you gotta quote unquote sell your soul and rap about this to your people. So yeah, Carlos, our older generation is like, it is trash, because most of it is trash. It's not feeding our soul. It's not teaching us to be better people. Oftentimes it's changing now, because a lot of time, because now, like you, Carlos, a lot of our music people are entrepreneurs, and they're in control of their music and in their labels. So they're able to control what they're speaking. But for a while, the music was definitely something that was perpetuating ways in trauma. It was perpetuating trauma, like slap her if she ain't listening to you.
Right.
Like we don't respect women and wonder why Black women don't want to have Black men in the household. So music could be very, very, it's deep.
It creates all of this cycle. Back to you, Dr. Hall. This is complex now.
So essentially what they're talking about is, one of the theories that we work with is narrative therapy.
What does that
with
mean?
Narrative therapy, basically it's you telling your story in your own words in a way where you get to write it. So the society and the world doesn't get to tell you how you're living, you get to say how you're living. So with rap music especially, it came about as a way for us to tell our experience, even starting from the message. Don't push me because I'm close to the edge. That was people talking about what is happening in our environment. And that type of music never went anywhere, but we get mainstream coming in and out to kind of determine what sells and what doesn't. But no matter what, every rapper is telling their story, and it's always been narrative. It's me, here are the things that I see all the time, here are the things that I'm experiencing it, and I am able to put this to a beat and give it to the world.
Now link that back to mental health. Link that back to mental health.
So this is them being able to have catharsis. This is them being able to get it off of their chest and like basically scream, this is what's happening to us. Why are you not paying attention? Why are you not seeing it?
Catharsis, what do you mean? What do you mean, catharsis?
Getting it off their chest, releasing it in the way that we don't necessarily go to therapy. This is their therapy. This is a way for them to be able to release that pressure and talk to the world in the way that they can't talk to a therapist.
And are you saying that some of what is happening on the street is that kind of catharsis then?
Yes, it is a bloodletting. It is essentially...
Whoa. That sounds pretty powerful. What do you mean?
It is essentially what happens when people get to their limit. So when you can't take any more of what you've been taking, and you work within the system, you've been quiet, you've been docile, you've been asking, and eventually you stop asking. So if this is the thing that you listen to, I'm going to go in this direction, because what I've been trying is no longer working.
So when you see a Black man then who's essentially lynched in a modern day kind of way as a spectacle, okay, and then a Black woman is in her home and then she's shot down, then that sort of then evokes all of that? Is that what you're saying? All of this that's been held down?
Well, that evokes it because what we're reacting to is a reassertion of white supremacy, essentially. So here I am as a person or as a system who has the ability to control your life, and I can take it as I please without punishment. And we as Black people do not want to take that. We are human, we need to be seen and we need to be heard. And every channel that we've used to be heard so far has fallen on deaf ears. And now we are where we are.
So I want to work with then what is actually, then you see this, Dr. Anna, you see this kind of thing in your office all the time. What are the ways that people are expressing this kind of pain?
Well, I think just kind of to piggyback on Dr. Hall, I'm aware of a lot of my more recent patients coming to me because they're leaving their white therapists who they've worked with for years, who helped them tremendously in several areas of their lives. But when it comes to racism and racial trauma, they're paralyzed or they're fragile or, you know, they're ill-equipped, right, to navigate it. And so I think that people are coming to me having to leave relationships that meant a lot to them and then having to work with this new person who's also, right, not Black, and they're having to settle for me because there aren't enough Black clinicians that are available. And so there's just an overwhelming sense of, I'm so exhausted. I have nowhere to go. I can't process this at home with my family. I can't process this with my friends. I can't process this in my work environment. And then they're sitting in therapy and maybe they feel like they can't even process it in therapy, which is supposed to be a safe space. And you add the fact that we're in a global pandemic, people are in their homes doing therapy. So now what used to be maybe your sanctuary, now it's littered with all of your trauma and your grief and your pain. And it's suffocating. You know, you have to sit in it. Whereas normally you come to someone's office, you know, in my office, I hold it for them and they leave it here with me and then they go home. Now they're stuck in it at home. And it's just this it's so much. It's just too many things right now is what I'm really hyper aware of in my work.
I want to get to another piece then. Okay, given that there may not be a sufficient number of Black therapists, especially in San Diego, and then you use the language, you said it's like settle for you, then what is the assurance that you even have the kind of training that would allow you to be able to work with the kind of trauma that Truth and Carlos in particular are speaking to that they witness on a daily basis in these families?
Right, and that's the rub, right? I mean, someone can have the most incredible experience. You know, I've been to universities that, you know, are, you know, really reputable. But that doesn't mean that I'm someone that's going to feel safe and supportive to you, right? And so despite experience, whether that's clinical experience, training, education, you know, you can still sit with someone who has all of these degrees behind them and they might further traumatize you or they might invalidate you. And then where do you go? Right? Then there's this learned helplessness that comes from that. And, you know, the cycle of being on this merry-go-round of exhaustion and rage and frustration and invalidation.
So what is happening to me is I'm noticing a sort of subtle trauma listening to all of this. And I don't know if actually offering this, you as clinicians are feeling some of this as well. But what I know is that it's activating the generational pieces, is activating the part of me that remembers in the Deep South that you weren't supposed to talk about your stuff in the streets. You weren't supposed to. And boy, you just go pray on that. And then, but there was something else that was going on in me that I didn't know how to express. So Truth, I want to come back to you because there must be some ways that people are looking for, not just like, well, we know what you're describing. We know this trauma. What can we begin to do to address this? What are some of the ways that we can turn to each other or turn to resources? I mean, what kinds of things are there for us?
I think honestly, just talking to that's a tough question.
Yeah, I know.
Because a lot of people don't have, you know, people they can turn to and stuff like that. I know for me, the things that I did when I was getting out of my trauma, when I was healing from my complex trauma, is definitely like talking to, thankfully my mom was receptive because we had a lot of generational trauma within growing up together. And so just talking to my mom about what happened and understanding why she made the decisions she made, because oftentimes we have these own narratives in our mind of why people that have hurt us have why they made certain choices, not knowing why they made those choices. And maybe that was the only choice they had to make at the time, right? And so a lot of times we got to go back to that childhood trauma, because there's still an inner child in us that needs to be healed. There's a child in us that needs to know that it's okay, I love you. You need to tell your child, you don't believe that?
No, we don't do that. No.
We don't do that, but that's why that's why I'm offering that up in this space. Since we don't do it, let's try to do that. Maybe try to talk to that person, that inner child in you, and talk to that person that had hurt you, and it can help you understand why they made the decisions they made. And maybe you can let go of some of those things that you're holding on to and carrying with you day by day.
But that's a cultural injunction. I mean, that is already a major shift that you're talking about right there. Is to even talk about these things in our families, because we were not taught how to do that.
I understand that, and okay. I understand, but we got to start doing it.
Okay, and Carlos is about to jump out the screen again, so I got to go there. So Carlos, talk to me.
I think the thing that, to speak to what Truth is talking about, is the ability to be vulnerable, right? Being Black in America it's not like you get a ticket to be vulnerable. Crying? Are you kidding me? I'll give you something to cry about, boy.
Exactly, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's the message.
Right. But I don't actually think that's how people feel. You know, when I sit in therapy sessions with people of color, a lot of times, you know, my vernacular, my speech, my mannerisms, it goes back to what I'm used to being with, and I could see the clients just relax. You know, when I start, you know, using the same words in the slang and my tone changes. And one of the things that's interesting is that a lot of people really just want their experience validated, right? Like I've been speaking to people about times that I've been arrested for literally just walking down the street, and other people of color are like, man, thank you. I know that happens, and I'm like, it sucks. You know, that paranoia, the feeling that you get when you see a police officer, even though I'm not doing the things that I used to do that caused me to be nervous around police, right? It stays with me. It's forever with me. I hear a police siren, boop, boop, and here we go. You know what I'm saying? What's going to happen? And so just validating people's experience. And then to also what Truth is talking about, a thing that I've had to realize with, and speaking to the older generation, is coming from, as a young person, coming to like my dad, who's 82, you know, couldn't buy a hamburger at certain restaurants with his quarter, and it's the same quarter that his white friends could buy a hamburger with, right? And he was well known in Arizona, and I never understood that, and so what I had to do was come from a place of learning and understanding, and that helped bridge the gap. Like, Dad, what was it like? You know, and was it the same as when I go to a restaurant with, back when I used to have a white girlfriend, and they would just skip over us? That made me feel some sort of way. Is that what it felt like for you? And seeking to understand, to bridge that generational gap, because not a lot has changed. It looks a little different, but I mean, the feelings are feelings, emotions. We connect with others through pain.
So the vulnerability, then this is where I want to come back to you, Dr. Anna. Getting to that place of vulnerability. I was a clinician for a number of years, and getting to that space of vulnerability, especially with my Black clients, that was always the challenge. First, we had to get through all the different levels of trauma, and then to get to that deep vulnerability so that the healing could begin. How do you get there? How do you get there? How do you help folks get there?
I mean, it looks so different in each case, right? Each person is unique, their experience is so unique, but you have to create that safety and that trust, and that can take time, you know, a lot of time for some people. And so once you can get there, I mean, you have to factor in so many different things with trauma work. You can't just necessarily dive into the trauma, because you can create a harmful situation. You know, the person can be actively suicidal, they can be actively homicidal, which is more rare, but it happens. And so you want to make sure that the person is ready to delve into this like really hard place of the trauma work. And it's triggering, and a lot of people quit because it's hard to do it. I tell people, you've got to go like up this mountain and go through a bunch of hell before you come out the other side. And you might get halfway through that mountain and say, I'm going to go right back down, and you leave. And people do quit therapy when they're doing trauma work, because in my opinion, it's the hardest work to do for patients. It's so triggering. You leave here and you don't necessarily feel better. Sometimes you feel worse.
Yeah, I used to do a clinical group with all African-American professionals in Washington, D.C. And people would leave in the middle of the process because digging into that pain was just a little bit too much. But Dr. Hall, you know, Chris, when you're training folks, you're not just training Black clinicians, you're training white clinicians too. So how do you help a white clinician be truly anti-racist in their work?
I get them to understand that they are a white person representing the system doing this work. So that's where we have to start, because that is how you are going to be perceived. Yet another white person in my life telling me what to do, how to think, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And you have to own that and absorb it, because that's what you represent to folks. And it's not necessarily anything that you did, but this is how you're going to show up. So
but
in knowing that,
what about the fragility of that therapist encountering that stuff and feeling some kind of way because Black person gets all enraged?
I'm a very particular type of professor, so they know me for giving them exactly kind of what's going on and what's going to happen. Right. So I always kind of protect them in a way of understanding their humanity, but I don't sugarcoat it, because I want you to be prepared for what this world is going to look like after you leave my care as your supervisor. So I make sure that they know, again, you are not going to know everything, and you're going to be perceived in a certain way because of the way that you look. Now that you know that, I need for you to get to know this client. I need for you to do everything in your power to understand what this client's perspective is. And if you can't connect with them empathetically through skin color, you need to find some other way to understand who they are and what their story is. So lately, this last semester, I had the privilege of teaching a hybrid course with education and counseling, where we looked specifically at African Americans, and we looked at African American education with a counseling lens. And we just did a whole history of the Black experience and kind of what that looks like in our country, systems of power and structure, and what you then have to know in order to go into that room. That's something that we only teach every other year. But it's something, there are things that exist, and we had a lot of white kids in there who want to understand this and want to do good work.
Okay, but Dr. Arteaga-Biggs and Dr. Hall, you know that our training did not include, early on, at least in the process, we were taught that sometimes African Americans tend to have a lack of capacity for insight, and therefore may show more regressive behaviors and things of that sort. I don't know if you got trained that way. I got trained that way.
Not in counseling.
What, not in counseling? What about you, Dr. Arteaga-Biggs? Didn't you get that stuff?
Oh my God, you have 10 hours. Can we dive into this? It's
yes.
incredibly infuriating. I got in 6 years of a doctoral program, one course. In my master's program, one course. I was the only Latina. There was one Black person in my doctoral program. I was the only Latina, the only immigrant. There were a few other Asian students and my Syrian best friend. But other than that, that was, and we had to, hold the line, and we had to deal with all the white fragility in the room. Love all of you. A lot of them are listening. Sorry, guys, but you were impossible. You made it awful. And we're ill-equipped. We're ill-equipped to deal with it. White clinicians are extremely ill-equipped. Non-Black clinicians, we're extremely ill-equipped. We're not taught how to do this.
Okay, so those of you on the front line, Truth and Carlos, you got to give us something here. Carlos, give us something, please. We need to give some hope and some direction for this.
Oh man, so I'm full of hope. The people that I've been working with in these communities, I just call it untapped potential, right? Mm-hmm. We have in underserved communities, and I don't even know if that's an appropriate word, because there's a lot of services. It's hard to access sometimes, but there are kids are so smart, and they're so driven, right? Yes. They're growing up in a time, and I'm only 37, about to be 38, so now I feel old saying this, but they're growing up with technology that just gives them the ability to learn anything that they want to learn, right? And so when I work with young people, what they're starving for is human connection. What they don't necessarily need is the understanding that they could do anything. It's almost like they just need the permission to go ahead and try, right? And so people are doing amazing things in these communities over at Hoover, and Morris and Lincoln, right? But that's not what we're hearing. You know, that's not what the news is telling us.
No,
but
we're
when
not
you
hearing
get up
about
in
that at
there
all.
and you get to knowing these people, they're doing great stuff. And so
Yes.
they're passionate, they're driven, they understand technology, they understand that they have a voice. Just look at TikTok and what they're doing, you know,
Yes.
with these campaigns.
That's
Like
true.
it's time. We just need to get out of their way, right? We need to let them know, hey, you go ahead and you could do it. I love you. Fail hard, fail fast, and learn from it.
Hmm.
And we're going to be here to support you as the older generation.
Yeah, and be open-minded too. Like you were saying, I definitely see a lot of change happening with our younger generation. And again, I see them teaching the older generation, and it's just a beautiful thing to see that that generational wealth, I guess you can call it, because it is wealth, right? Because oftentimes I'm teaching my mama about therapy and I'm like, yeah, I'm in therapy. She's like, I want to be in therapy now. And it's just a beautiful thing. I work with the court systems, and even in San Diego and even in the DMV area, you know, a lot of times we work with a diversion program, and they're like putting this therapy thing on the families. And I'm trying to let them know, like, the older generation is not going to be taking that from you all because you guys have taken their children. So let's see how it works with their kids. And if they see their kids changing and healing, then they might be accepted to getting into therapy.
Okay.
The beautiful thing about Black people is that we are resilient. And we are, in spite of, still continuously like rise up. And I just love that about my people. And I just see that continuously happening. And I definitely see, like, I have big hope for the future with everything that's going on, and all the Black clinicians that are coming out of school and things of that nature that want to help their people from an African perspective and not from this Eurocentric perspective, because it's totally different how we do therapy and how they do therapy.
Okay. So let's begin to do our round. So each of you then needs to give us a way to really think about mental health going forward. Well, we still have this pandemic. We still have the protests and the social unrest. We still have the economic impact. We have this trifecta, if you will, of traumas that are still going to be hitting Black folks long after we're off this call. So let's begin to give people some sense of, okay, some things to think about. One tip, one tactic, one resource, something like that. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Arteaga-Biggs, then I'm going to go to you, Dr. Hall, and then Carlos, and then Truth. So each of you take a minute, really just give us something to really pull this together.
Okay, no pressure.
Sure. None whatsoever.
I think, you know, the one thing I wanted to make sure to talk about today, just the importance of boundaries. That's something that you do have control over. There's a lot you don't have control over, and there's a lot that's happening to you and around you, and it's terrorizing. But boundaries are something you have control over. You have control with your families, with your friends, with colleagues, with acquaintances, people that are exhausting you, people who are toxic. You have boundaries with your time, with your social media usage, with what news you take in, what you read. And you have the ability to do self-care even from your home, even in your bathroom, right? Like a bath or, you know, a hot shower, hopefully, if you have access to that. That there's, you know, a lot of things that you can do just to breathe, to take some space and some time and to heal. And it's okay to do that. So be aware of your boundaries, identify what those are, write them down, write down some one-liners for your non-Black or white, you know, fragile or rageful friends that are exhausting you or asking you to educate them or to forgive them or whatever the case. Write things down that you can say. Shut down when you need to. Shut down for as long as you need to. That's what I would want to kind of leave here saying.
But I want to go with this boundary piece. The importance of the boundary. What does that do for me to have that boundary? What does that do for me psychologically?
Well, it's empowering in a lot of ways. It's a piece of this like resilience that I think Carlos was mentioning, or maybe it was Truth, that, you know, you can allow or decide who you're going to allow into your space. And again, that can be someone physically present, or that can just be Donald Trump on the news. You don't have to listen to that guy. Or maybe if you want to, you can listen to him through Sarah CPR's account on Instagram, where it's like a little more palatable, maybe. I don't know. But you just, it's a way to sort of take back a little bit of that control and to be able to say enough. And this is the line in the sand for me, and you can't cross
So I don't have to educate everybody?
it.
I don't?
No, them to read a book or Google, Google stuff.
All right. I'm allowed to do that.
Yes.
You gave me permission. I'm going to take that one on. Okay, Dr. Hall.
To piggyback off Dr. Biggs, you need to understand how you experience joy.
All right.
And a lot of people have no idea. They are so stuck in their everyday, and you might take that shower or you might paint your nails, but how do you experience true and pure joy? When you disconnect and are able to give back to yourself completely, what does self-care look like to you fully? And so many people are so stuck in kind of their everyday, they don't get the opportunity to really think about it. So when you set those boundaries and you get that time to yourself, you need to give it all back to you, because it's very hard to take care of other people if you are suffering and if you haven't done what you need to do to make sure that you're okay.
And what you mean by joy? I don't even know what you mean by joy.
Where do you feel unbridled, unmitigated, purely open, pure happiness in the world? And what was the last time you actually found it, grasped it, and felt it?
And so access that feeling, try to figure out when I've had that, and then try to figure out how to give that to myself again.
And again, Black people are resilient as hell. For us, sometimes we might find that joy in church. For others, we might find it in music. For others, they might find it in making a quilt. It does not matter, but you need to figure out what that is and give it to yourself before you give anybody else another ounce of what you don't have.
Okay. So set that boundary. Know that you have the right to do that, so that you have this agency about who is in your space. Find out what your joy is, and then live into that joy as best you can. Am I understanding that? Okay. Yep. Carlos.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think that leads well into what basically like my life mission is to help people find their purpose. Because I find that when you are passionate about something, when you have somewhere that you want to get to, when there is a version of you out there that you really are aspiring to get to, that also helps sometimes shed some of all this trauma that is trying to latch onto our back, right? Because it's like sometimes you're just like, I ain't got time for you, and you set boundaries, right? Like if I'm trying to get way over there, you know, like you're Dr. Anna and Dr. Kristopher, y'all had to set some strategic boundaries to get your PhD, like boundaries I ain't got, so I ain't gonna get a PhD, right? So, you know, when you have a purpose and a passion and you're chasing that and you're talking about it to people and you're starting to make connections, you're gonna attract awesome people into your life that will help you build you up and empower you so that you can get to the place that you want to get to.
Okay, so you're talking about purpose and intention, sort of knowing what you're about, and then drawing that energy to you. Am I understanding that?
Yeah, and well, yes. It's just
no. You have another thought. What's your other thought? Bring your other thought.
It's about taking action towards becoming what it is that you want to become. Like taking action. Some of this stuff that is happening in the world, it stopped me dead in my tracks. Right. And when I get stopped and when people stop and they just can't seem to put the good foot forward, even a millimeter, right? Then the depression, the anxiety will start creeping in because you start losing focus. Yeah, you start just wading in the muck of everything that's going on. And so sometimes you just have to take the smallest of steps. And in my therapy office, sometimes I tell people, you showed up. You made it here. That's the most important thing that you could have done today, is that you showed up and you're giving yourself a chance.
Okay, thank you. And truth, give us the final truth.
Yes, and know that you are worthy. You are so worthy, and love yourself, your flaws and all. Like Dr. Anna was saying, doing that trauma work is not easy at all. A lot of people don't make it through those therapy sessions and they run because it's hard work. Right now, it's all romanticized. Get your therapy, do your trauma work, but they don't know it's a lot of curling up like a baby at night because of that work you did, weeping. So make sure that you continuously know who you are, and remember that we come from a people that went through some things that most people would kill themselves if they endured. You come from a people that have overcome so much, so you are capable of doing things greater than they did. We just got to sharpen those tools in our toolbox, get some better coping skills, tap in with people that, you know, maybe have went to school and got a little more education on this trauma stuff so that we can understand what we're dealing with. Trust your intuition, become your best friend, because that can help you a lot of times find that purpose.
So, but I want to go back to your main word. Know that you are worthy.
Yes.
Break that down.
You're worthy, number one, because you are a human being. You're worthy because you were born at such a time as this. It's not an accident that you have come into this world. When you came into this world, it's divine. You're worthy. There's nobody that can take your worth or give you your worth. Only you can define that. So it's up to you to define how worthy you are and how you show up and how you tell people how to treat you. And don't ask for your freedom. Take your freedom, whatever that may look like. Your freedom may be being a singer. Take your freedom, honey. Do your thing. Your freedom may be being like Dr. Green or Tony. You know what I'm saying? Take your freedom. Do your thing. And the internet can be very helpful. You might not have a mentor in your life, but you could probably find one on the internet that you could look up to. Like, how did this person get? That's what I did. I wanted to be a singer, so I would study all the singers. I would study all the people that have done motivational speaking. How did they get there? And they went through a lot of things too, but they didn't give up. They knew they were worthy. They trust the process, trust their intuition, and remember that they come from a people that have overcome tremendous things that most people cannot endure.
All right, so set that boundary, find your joy, live that purpose, know your worth. All right. Hi, Tony Young.
Hey guys. Sorry I couldn't get you in the more earlier in the discussion, and you guys, I just want to let you know that for folks who are watching this, I am certain that there are a lot of individuals who are able to take a lot out of this and consider some of the things that they're going through, especially folks who are actually trying to make these drastic changes and fighting for these changes in our society right now. And there are people who we see as leaders who are leading the way, but they certainly need this type of engagement. And I just want to say thank you for that. And it made me think, Dr. Green, in regards to, some of the other, like say in the 60s and the 50s civil rights protests, and it was led by many of the faith-based community. And for a lot of reasons, they're not as prevalent at this point in time. But I'm very happy. I'm not sure, I wasn't there at the time, but I'm certain that the engagement of the therapists during that time maybe not have been as great. And the fact that you are taking leadership on this at this point in time might make a big difference in the actual outcome of what happens here in regards to these reforms. So, you all are leaders and champions for something that's very important for a lot of people, especially the people who have experienced this trauma. So,
right.
So I'm just so thankful that you all were a part of this, and hopefully we can bring you back and we can talk about this for additional insight on these issues. And so thank you for that. And Dr. Green, I appreciate you. I understand you have a background in this, but maybe you did learn a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I did this for a hot minute in my life as well. So I know something about that. So a lot of people are asking about services. What we want you to know is that this is a list of services that are available in San Diego County. There are ways that you can learn about this through podcasts, but there are also ways that you can do this through the county. There are mental health services, and there are a number of therapists of color in the county. Ask for and advocate for that, because cultural congruence is often an important thing in terms of doing this work. If you have further questions, write us at San Diego, Rise San Diego, and we will be able to follow up with you on this. We want to make sure that people see this as a resource, not just, an hour and 10 minutes to have this conversation. And I want you to know, panel, if you haven't look at the chat. There's a lot of love showing up in there, because people are really feeling like this was therapy. Simply being able to have an open conversation about these kinds of things, to make it all right, to take away the taboo, to begin to move in the direction that our mental health, along with our physical health, along with our activism, all of these things are important. Boundaries, joy, purpose, and worthiness. Thank you all so much. We're going to do a quick survey. We're going to have some nonprofit and small business trainings coming up. We'll let you know about those when they do happen. The next one we're going to do is this controversial thing called allyship versus accomplice.
Are they ready to talk about that, Dr. Green? I'm not sure.
Oh, they're ready to talk about that. So that's going to come right before the 4th of July. So next Thursday, that's where we're going to be with that. And Dr. Roxanne Kamani will be back as your moderator. And we're going to really work that issue because that's one that's hot and alive for us as well. Okay, so Tony, you get the final word.
Well, I would just say again, thank you. You all did great.
We're good.
Dr. Green, thank you for providing this, this leadership in regards to this panel. We appreciate you. And the final thing is that we have a poll question like we always have and the question is really basically 2 questions. Overall, how would you rate the virtual event and how likely is it that you would recommend this event to a friend or colleague? So if you guys can out there can answer these questions and give us your feedback, we appreciate it. And with that, Wilnisha from DMV, I want to say thank you for coming out from here, way out there.
Way out there.
Yes, it's 10 o'clock out here, y'all.
Is it? I appreciate it.
Dr.
Anna, Dr. Chris, God bless you. You all have a wonderful evening.
Okay, thanks a lot, Carlos. Okay, bye now.
Peace and love, y'all.
All right. That was